Okay, well, it's an enormous pleasure to have with me for this conversation Dr. Basil Germond from the Department of Politics, Philosophy and Religion. Quite a mouthful, that, isn't it? Yes. Why don't you tell us something about yourself, Basil? You work here at Lancaster University.
Yes, thank you very much, Tony. Well, what can I say in terms of my research interest and field of specialization? Broadly speaking, I'm specializing in international relations, so world politics, how the international system works. That's my broad field of specialization. And I'm more specifically working on naval affairs, maritime affairs.
So sort of naval and maritime diplomacy or security or?
Different aspects of naval affairs and maritime. So it could be about the role of navies in the post-Cold War era, but could also be, I'm particularly interested in the maritime dimension of the European Union security. So why and how the sea is important for the European Union, especially in terms of security.
Okay. Well, of course, I must say that you're Swiss, aren't you?
Yes.
I always find it, I always crack this joke with you, I know, I always find it fascinating you're a Swiss interested in navies and the sea.
Yeah.
Which is good. So, what type of research do you do then? So, do you look at documents? Do you talk to people? What's your usual method before we come round to discussing the corpus method?
It's kind of blended research in a sense that I tend to use a lot of official documents.
Okay.
I've always thought that relying on the readings of plenty of official documents should be the first step before studying any type of research in my field. But I also work very much with series, international relations series, and interviews as well.
Okay. So interviews, a lot of textual material, and then you're trying to situate what you find in the textual material and in the interviews in the context of the theories that you use, and vice versa, I would guess.
Exactly, yeah. You got the point.
I got it. Okay, well, of course, the word text seems to usher in a discussion of corpus. When did you first come across the method of using corpus linguistics?
By name some years ago, but practically only when you introduced me to corpus linguistics. Yeah, I mean, I can say more about that.
Why not?
Perhaps a bit later on when I will tell you what corpus linguistics can bring to my very research project, but for sure, for the past, I've been doing research for like more than 10 years now. If I think like when I started the PhD in 2003,
right?
So for those past 10 years, I've not been involved in corpus queries.
But you were swimming in text, and then one day we met and had a conversation about corpus linguistics.
Exactly.
So, cast your mind back from that initial conversation. What struck you as possibly the most interesting thing about corpus linguistics, or the application of corpus methods to your subject area?
Definitely the fact that with corpus methodologies, it becomes possible for me to analyze or use or take into account a huge quantity of textual data, something that I've always wanted to do, and I knew it was possible, but it's not something which is very much spread in my own discipline, and I simply did not have the methodological knowledge and the time or team to help me,
Yeah,
etc.
okay. But the scale of the analysis you could undertake was attractive.
Very attractive indeed.
And how did we start off? We sort of had a conversation first about EU maritime diplomacy, and then I think we've been doing some work looking at piracy and documents around piracy and counter-piracy. Do you want to maybe just sketch out the research questions that you're trying to explore using Corpora at the moment?
Without using too much of my jargon in international relations. Yes,
I went to understand.
All right. Yeah, within the CAS now, my project deals with maritime security and piracy discourses.
So CAS is our research centre, the ESRC Centre for Corpus Approach to Social Science, and you have this project in that. Yeah.
Yes, true. So maritime security and piracy discourses. My main objective is to look at how the EU, the European Union, represents the threats of piracy and maritime security in its discourse, how the EU represents its role when it comes to tackling those threats, and how the EU constructs solutions to maritime security issues or piracy issues.
So the capacity of some of the corpus methods, in essence, to gist very large collections, tell you what they're about through methods, say, like keywords, is quite useful to you.
It is indeed very useful, all the more since the EU is a very large institution with plenty of different bodies, the Commission, the Council, different special agencies, and also the member states are very much involved in all of the processes. So you have plenty of agencies, bodies, institutions producing textual data, and at the end of the day, when I want to do research on like the very topic of the EU and piracy, which may look like something very precise, I anyway end up with a huge quantity of textual data. Again, something I would not be able to analyze using traditional methods in international relations, like, for example, just like discourse analysis or even critical
close readings of individual texts. That's
simply impossible.
Yeah. So I guess part of your interest, both is not to say, is in sort of measuring the distance between claims and textual reality. If they say, if somebody says to you, this is our policy, and then when you look through all the text, you discover that that isn't well represented in there, or indeed the policy seems to be something quite different in that text. Is that of interest to you?
This is of interest to me, but in addition to that, I try to discover how a certain representation of issues and a certain construction of the solutions contribute to the normalization of certain practices at the end of the day.
I see, so sort of the construction of certain practices leading to their normalization or acceptance. That's one of the things you might be interested in. Are you interested in the question then, I can ask all these silly questions because they're not in your subject, but are you interested in the question then of how the EU as a transnational actor talks about these things and how that contrasts with what the member states say? So are they always in harmony? Do they just take the line from the EU and they sing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, or do you possibly find differences between the EU discourse and the member state discourse in this area?
Yes, a lot of differences. The relationship between the member states, member of the EU, and the EU itself has always been kind of like uneasy relationship. We can think of member states influencing the EU's policies, but also EU's policies influencing member states. So it's going in two ways. So when it comes to discourses, obviously there's a huge difference between member states and the EU, especially big member states, let's say powerful member states within the EU like France or the UK or Germany, those countries, they tend to develop very strong discourse of their own, especially when it comes to foreign policy, security issues, and sometimes it's not aligned at all with the EU. But again, as I said, within the EU you have at least two different types of bodies. Those related to the Commission, the supranational element of the EU, and the discourse related to the Council, which is more like the intergovernmental part of the Union. So everything which originates from the Council is more in line with the Member States, but the smaller common denominator, obviously.
Okay, so your corpus then is composed of several parts, sort of an EU part that gives you that sort of international discourse or transnational discourse, and then you have corpora on the same topic from the relevant ministries in the Member States, so maybe in the UK it would be the Ministry of Defence, so things they're talking about maritime security.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you're able to do a compare and contrast number in order to see how these discourses are influencing one another or asserting themselves as independent from one another. Is that, have I got it right?
Yes, I mean, it's not the only thing I'd like to do with this project, but that is part of it because there are interesting findings to discover when it comes to the differences between Member States' discourse and the EU's discourse. But from the beginning, I've been particularly interested in the EU's discourse as such, because one of my other fields of specialization, apart from maritime naval affairs, is the European Union geopolitical ambitions, and thus the growing geopolitical discourse within the Union, and how the Union tries to normalize practices of power projection, like operating beyond its external boundaries as to tackle threats as far away as possible from the EU and as soon as they materialize. So I try to look at the EU's discourse so as to see how those practices are normalized through certain representation and construction of threats and solution to the threats.
The answer might be no, but in your work to date, have you gained any insights from using the corpora that have either made you problematize some of your theories or some of your hypotheses, or is it all merely reconfirmed what you know but on a grander scale?
Both. I don't know if I should talk about that before the research is published,
but just a brief snippet for us.
In terms of how purpose approaches have helped me to discover some elements that then have allowed me to reframe some of my research questions. A good example, I think something very clear for everyone. When it comes to the European Union foreign and security policy currently, there is an expression which is rather widespread in academia, the comprehensive approach to security. The fact that the EU has a specific approach to security which is comprehensive, like dealing with the causes of problems and not only with the symptoms, using not only the military but also civilian capabilities, like foreign aid as well, or post-conflict reconstruction, etc., etc. So this comprehensive approach is kind of trademark for the EU. So I was expecting seeing that I was expecting this expression, this very expression, the comprehensive approach to security, to be present in a lot of texts relating to maritime security and piracy. And from our very preliminary findings, it seems it's not very much the case.
Right.
And this is currently leading me to towards a certain reframing of my hypothesis, at least, if not the research question, at least the hypothesis.
So there's an example where the, as I call it, the confrontation with data has changed your mind or your view or your hypothesis.
Yes, and also something which opens a door to like very interesting piece of published work, because if I can tell some of my colleagues in the very field of the European security and defense policy, you see this comprehensive approach to security, this dimension, is not that present in discourses, at least in the field of maritime security and piracy. That will be something striking and creating a lot of exchange with other scholars working in that field.
Well, in terms of impact then on people listening, is this something which is largely of academic concern? So you'll be able to talk to other scholars in your field and they'll say, what a clever chap you are. Or are there people beyond academia who need to hear these messages, and are they hearing it?
Naval practitioners. Naval practitioners are more and more interested in studies about discourses or representation, because more and more often they are asked, they need to justify the budget for the navies. And that's why it's important to see how threats are constructed, how the Navy's role is constructed, so as they can align their own narrative. So
they're projecting themselves in language as well as on the sea.
Yeah, but at a very unbaronic level. Because obviously there are plenty of other factors which determine naval policies, and that's just fair enough. But I must say, when I meet naval practitioners, I talk about my project, they are always like very interested in discussing more and collaborating if they can. Naval practitioners are very happy to share published documents when it's not like restricted, and to try to tell the world, okay, that's what we are doing. So they are very happy to share in their documents. They understand, then I will analyze them and come across with findings they did not expect before, but they seem to be happy with that.
So you're talking to some of them without naming names perhaps, you're talking to some of them on an ongoing basis?
Yes.
Great. So a nice example of corpus linguistics being used in international relations and then taken on board by some people who might actually change what they do or how things are done as a consequence.
Hopefully, yes.
Good. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Basil?
No, not at this stage of the project. I'm sure that in the coming 6 months, when I will come up with more precise findings, we may well have another of those discussions.
Let's have another conversation in a few months then. Okay, Basil, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan.